Okay, let's unpack this.
Let's.
Today, we are attempting a deep dive into a project that just kind of defies rational analysis. I mean, it is arguably the most economically unjustifiable, philosophically staggering piece of construction in modern history.
I think staggering might even be underselling it.
Probably, yeah. We're talking about something that started with a noodle and ended with a nuclear-sized price tag. We're talking about the Gilgandra Gigasparg.
And this whole thing, it's the saga of a single, simple plate of food spaghetti aglio e olio that somehow managed to command a final price tag that rivals the GDP of a mid-sized nation.
Exactly. This entire saga, it kicks off back in 2020. Gilgandra, New South Wales, Australia. And the goal was, on paper, so simple. Yeah. Just create the world's largest plate of spaghetti.
Simple on paper.
Right. And our mission today is to frame this as more than just some, monumental engineering study. It's an exploration of genuine philosophical absurdity. It's a quest for unprecedented, unbelievable scale that seems to be driven purely by the desire to hold a world record.
Regardless of cost, consequence, or just, basic common sense.
It truly serves as the ultimate aha moment in human excess and ambition.
And to really appreciate the sheer tension here, the absurdity of it, you just have to internalize the physical dimensions we're talking about.
Oh.
We are not talking about a novelty serving dish or like a big catering tray. We are talking about a foundation plate that was 10 miles wide.
10 miles wide.
And holding a mass of spaghetti that rose 2 full miles into the Australian sky.
My brain actually struggles to process those numbers in a culinary context. A 2-mile-high pile of spaghetti. I mean, that's a whole new level of engineering just to make sure it doesn't collapse into a gigantic, oily puddle.
And that scale, that radical pursuit of the infinite, the impossible, that is precisely why the initial budget, which was already ambitious at $500 million, it ballooned catastrophically. The project became an all-consuming financial singularity.
Can we just sit with that final number for a second? The staggering final cost of the entire venture after all the engineering, materials, delays, everything.
Go on.
$47.3 billion.
$47.3 billion.
$47.3 billion. For spaghetti. It's a sum so large that just saying it out loud should trigger economic alarm bells across the globe.
And the financial absurdity, as we're going to see, it wasn't some unfortunate side effect, was it?
No, not at all. It was central to the project's success, its identity, and, its ultimate tragedy.
So if we connect this to the bigger picture,
right?
This is what you called a pseudo-paradoxicalizationality?
Yes. And if we break that down simply, it's a paradox that's masquerading as a rationale. The financial absurdity is so overwhelming that it forces you to question the very definition of rationality itself.
How can something so economically nonsensical even exist?
Exactly. And the syndicate, the group behind this, they prove that if you have absolute capital, you can create a structure where the economic absurdity becomes the central accepted reality. It's a terrifying thought, really. So let's begin at the beginning. Who had the vision, and I think I lean more toward the word hubris, to even start something this relentless?
Well, this whole venture was driven by a really focused private entity, the Australian Spaghetti Syndicate.
Or the ASS.
The ASS, yes. And they were utterly unlike any typical construction conglomerate or, food services company. It was less a corporation and more a philosophical engine that was just disguised as a construction outfit.
And at the very top,
at its absolute apex, was a figure defined by this silent, relentless will, the Don Gargiulo Pompatus. His persona was the undisputed gravitational center of the syndicate. His desire was paramount. End of story.
So Pompatus was the vision, the silent will. But every, grand, ludicrous vision needs an aggressive, loud voice to defend it against a very skeptical world.
It certainly does. And that role fell to the aggressive mouthpiece, the relentless PR goon, Stanky Hufferspat.
I'm guessing he had his work cut out for him. Selling a $47 billion plate of noodles to the Australian public can't have been easy.
Well, what Hufferspat was essentially selling was a cult of scale. And to understand that cult, you have to understand the core driver of the ASS. It wasn't profit, not in the standard quarterly returns sense, anyway.
Or was it?
Their motivation was identified as this profound, almost pathological drive toward infinite scale and excess. The sources identify this core condition as a paramania.
A paramania. So if I break that down, it's literally the obsession with boundless, infinite scale.
That's it.
So it wasn't enough to be the biggest. They had to be infinitely big.
Precisely. And that explains why they kept pouring money into this thing. Because if your goal is the infinite, well, there can't be a financial ceiling, can there?
No, I guess not.
Pompadous's will was aimed purely at achieving what they called hypertrophicality, just excessive growth in every single metric. Cost, size, you name it.
And that pursuit of aperomania didn't just define their project specs, right?
Right.
It dictated their whole spending philosophy.
Absolutely. They viewed any limit, any budget, as a moral failure, not an economic one.
Which brings us right back to that terrifying budget explosion. It starts, I guess, reasonably in 2020. $500 million initial budget.
I mean, that's enough to build a substantial skyscraper, a respectable bridge.
For sure. But what was the moment? What was the critical design change that caused the shift from a $500 million project to a $47.3 billion one?
It was the commitment to the 10-mile plate and the 2-mile high structure. Once those dimensions were locked in, conventional cost management just became impossible.
It went out the window.
Completely. Every technical problem, every material need, every stabilization challenge, it had to be solved at a scale that had no precedent. And therefore, no budget constraints were even applicable anymore.
So the final figure, the $47.3 billion, that wasn't a mistake on a spreadsheet. It was an intentional, necessary expenditure.
It was an embrace. And this is where the philosophy truly takes over. The syndicate's own official analysis of the cost trajectory reveals their guiding principle. They were determined to defy argumentum ad criminam.
That's a new one on me, argumentum ad criminam.
It's the logical fallacy of appealing to wealth or cost. So essentially arguing that something is true or correct because it is expensive. Or, on the flip side, that a project is flawed because it costs too much.
So the syndicate just refused to let the mere number, $47.3 billion, serve as an argument against the validity or the necessity of their vision.
They had the capital, and therefore the cost was declared the justified, necessary price for achieving the unprecedented, extravagant scale they desired.
Wait, so the cost wasn't a liability? It was proof of concept. The expense itself was supposed to shut down critics. You think we should stop? Look how much we've spent. We must succeed.
Exactly that. The price tag became the ultimate badge of honor. It was essential to the structure's identity. The investment wasn't about return. It was about proving the absolute boundless will of Don Pompadous.
It created that state of, what was it again?
Pseudo-paradoxicalizationality. The economic failure is so immense, it paradoxically becomes a success metric within their own system.
For them, the $47.3 billion was the required fee for infinite achievement.
They didn't fail at budgeting. They succeeded at demonstrating boundless resource allocation.
That's a truly chilling way to reframe financial accountability. It means that the cost was irrelevant. Only the scale mattered. We're talking about a project that deliberately sought to break economic reality just to build a plate of pasta.
And that mindset, well, it justified everything that followed, from the intense labor regime to the engineering marvels they were forced to invent just to make plastic behave like bedrock.
Okay, so let's pivot from the terrifying finances to the actual physical construction. Building a 10-mile structure, even on flat land, that required logistics that sound like they're straight out of a science fiction movie.
Oh, absolutely. We're talking about a continuous operational scale involving a peak workforce of over 10,000 workers on this one Gilgandra site.
10,000 people.
And the conditions those workers labored under were immense. Because the scale was so unforgiving, the operational regime demanded absolute robotic precision from the human element.
What do you mean by that?
The entire process was defined by something they called autometromania, an obsession with mechanical actions and automation. It was about integrating human beings into systems that minimize deviation, treating them less like skilled artisans and more like, highly trained mechanical components.
And to manage all of this, they weren't just using security cameras, I take it.
Not even close. The massive operation was monitored by a sophisticated, all-seeing panopticon of systems performing constant etiolapsometry.
That sounds intensely precise. Can you elaborate on what etiolapsometry really means in this context?
In simple terms, it means the continuous, minute measurement of changes. So, across a structure that's 10 miles wide, even tiny variations in temperature or structural load or ground settlement could spell disaster.
Right.
Etiolapsometry meant continuously monitoring every single millimeter of material stress, flex, creep all in real time. Think about it. A system that's capable of detecting a microscopic crack or a subtle shift in the ground across an area the size of a small city.
That level of monitoring was essential to adhere to their blueprint of infinite scale.
It had to be.
Okay, let's focus on the plate itself. The structure that had to hold the entire 2-mile mass. This 10-mile-wide disk, it wasn't just a foundation. It was declared their first world record, world's largest plate.
It was indeed a true feat of what they called a paroscission, the act of creating a structure that, while it was finite in diameter, suggested a boundless scope. They formally declared the plate a monolithic paragon.
Wait, a paragon? I thought a paragon was a polygon with an infinite number of sides. How can a physical plate be that?
And that's the key. The term here is used philosophically. It suggests a structure of such continuous scope and size that it defies conventional geometry, it defies boundary. The plate wasn't intended to look like a dodecagon. It was meant to feel boundless, continuous, and unending to the eye.
That's the apyromanical vision applied to concrete form.
Exactly.
And what material was even capable of achieving this impossible scale while remaining stable?
It was a specialized, proprietary dielectric polymer. It had to be light enough not to just crush the earth beneath it, but also strong enough to bear 2 miles of spaghetti.
So how did they make it?
The fabrication process was arguably the most technologically advanced aspect of the whole project. They used a gigascale vat shearing system employing specialized advanced stereolithography.
So they effectively 3D printed a 10-mile-wide plastic plate?
Layer by layer, yeah, cured by these powerful ultraviolet banks arrayed all across the Australian desert. The logistical challenge of just maintaining the curing environment and uniform material composition across those dimensions is, well, it's almost impossible to get your head around.
It was bespoke material science applied to a joke.
Pretty much.
Let's talk about the surface, the part that actually touched the pasta. It had to withstand that crushing gravitational load, but also remain aesthetically pleasing, which is just a bizarre requirement for a food service item.
It is bizarre. But yes, the surface possessed a unique aperodactylic texture. And this texture wasn't just cosmetic. It was engineered to distribute the immense gravitas of the 2-mile superstructure.
And it had to look good.
Crucially, yes. It was also designed to maintain a pulchritudinous appearance, a beautiful, visually pleasing state, even under the immense stress and the oil coating. They wanted the plate to look flawless, even as it housed an economic catastrophe.
Incredible. So now we have this perfect, massive, 10-mile 3D printed plastic structure resting on the Earth. But the Earth moves. How did they ensure stability against natural forces like ground settlement or minor seismic activity?
This is where the engineering complexity moved from large-scale fabrication to advanced geotechnical defense. The foundation underneath the plate was this complex interlocking network of internal supports, monocircuitous and tricyclic reinforced trusses.
Those terms make it sound like it was designed with absolute redundancy.
It was. Monocircuitous suggests a single continuous load path, and tricyclic implies 3 layers of independent, redundant reinforcement. These weren't static supports. They formed a robust, redundant internal structure designed to bear any non-uniform loads.
But static support isn't enough when you're resting on a dynamic planet, right? You mentioned they countered the Earth's natural instability with active stabilization.
That's the most impressive part. The entire plate was equipped with an array of piezoelectric actuators.
What are those?
They're tiny, precise devices that use electricity to expand or contract, producing very small, specific mechanical movements. These were linked to continuous telemetry systems, constantly reading stress and position data.
So they were reading the plate's condition 24/7, and if one side started to settle a tiny bit, the actuators would just push back.
Exactly. They were making minor calculated dielectrificational adjustments, these tiny energy-pulsed corrections, to actively counter the Earth's own ontortuity.
Ontortuity, meaning its tendency to be warped or twisted.
Precisely. They were fighting tectonic movement and ground settlement with 1,000,000 small, constant energy pulses. It was like giving the plate a continuous, hyper-advanced massage to keep it absolutely level and stable against all geological odds.
It's engineering trying to defy geology.
It is.
And finally, the structural form. The reinforcement used specialized alloys.
Yes, the entire structure resembled a massive, horizontally laid toroid, that perfect donut shape, and it was reinforced with specialized fulgurite alloys.
Fulgurite, that's formed by lightning strikes, right?
Correct. The material is associated with the intense heat of lightning. The use of this alloy suggests an attempt to harness elemental strength, integrating a powerful, almost mythical durability into the material composition.
The dedication to structural integrity at this hypertrophical, impossible scale is genuinely breathtaking.
It is. They engineered stability against the planet itself, only to be undone later by, well, we'll get to the mice.
As the foundation settled and the plate achieved stability, the focus shifted to the culinary objective, filling that 10-mile-wide basin with 2 miles of spaghetti.
A daunting task.
And the dish they chose was the classic spaghetti aglio e olio, garlic and oil. Simple, pure, but I imagine incredibly structurally demanding at that scale.
The syndicate viewed this simplicity as a profound statement. They insisted that choosing aglio e olio elevated the dish to a sesquipedigon of purity.
A sesquipedigon, that's a monstrously large word.
And that's the point. It implies a demonstration of immense wealth and technical skill applied to the most fundamental recipe possible. It was supposed to be a minimalist triumph, billions spent on garlic, oil, and pasta.
Now we get to the actual production process, the making of that 2-mile-high mass of pasta. The sources call this process the normandization of the pasta. What does the normandization process even entail when you're preparing food on a scale that rivals a mountain?
Normandization describes the highly technical and proprietary steps required to create and assemble a culinary item on this impossible scale, all while maintaining a uniform texture.
Okay.
For aglio e olio, the critical step is the sauce application. They relied on a careful mixing of anhydrous garlic paste to sow garlic without moisture into the oil before the oil was injected into the vast 2-mile-high pasta mass.
Why the anhydrous paste? Why dry garlic?
If you used fresh garlic, the moisture content would compromise the structural integrity of the overall mass. The oil had to coat the noodles perfectly and uniformly to maintain cohesion and prevent slippage under its own immense weight.
So achieving homogeneity, a perfect mix, across a 2-mile mass of noodles, without frushing them or letting the whole thing slump.
That was the greatest operational challenge of the project.
And it was during this critical construction and saucing phase that the great tragedy occurred. Despite the sophisticated edilapsometry and the automation regime, the sheer mass of the food overcame the construction efforts.
It was a catastrophic collapse, an avalanche of spaghetti. The source material confirms that the weight distribution failed, and it claimed the lives of 386 workers.
Just an unimaginable loss of life.
Yeah.
Directly attributable to the pursuit of this singular, non-essential culinary world record.
Awful.
And this is where we have to pause and just reflect on the moral implications. $47.3 billion spent, 386 lives lost. And the syndicate's immediate response was not remorse, was it?
No, it was absolute control. The workers were quickly removed, and the affected areas were immediately sanitized and sealed. A terrifying level of efficiency.
And this efficiency was immediately followed by the moral gymnastics performed by the PR goon, Stanky Huffersback. The source describes the journalists he faced as fustilugs, gossip mongers.
He was immediately on the defensive. When confronted, Huffersback employed this rapid-fire strategy of deflection and dismissal.
Can you walk us through that defensive strategy? Because this is where the cynicism of the syndicate really shines.
First, he demonstrated what he called administulosity, a scolding, condescending nature toward the press. He was demanding they respect the scale of the achievement rather than focus on minor setbacks.
Minor setbacks.
Yes. And this was coupled with his primary tactic, omnicircumlocutiousness, the act of talking entirely around the issue, just using many, many words to say absolutely nothing about the deaths.
So he just refused to answer the questions about the casualties.
Initially, he dismissed the claims entirely, called them fake news, industry sabotage. But as photographic evidence and survivor testimony became undeniable, he was forced to pivot.
What was the pivot?
He admitted the incident happened, but immediately downplayed it as merely a tendentious rumor that had been blown out of proportion. The loss was real, but the narrative of the loss was dismissed as overly dramatic.
So he acknowledged 386 deaths, but claimed the story of the deaths was a rumor. That is truly disturbing.
And the syndicate's fundamental defense, their legal and moral shield, rested on one unwavering assertion, that the incident held no sway over the res ipsa loquitur of the syndicate's authority.
Or res ipsa loquitur. The thing speaks for itself. How on earth did they apply that to mass casualty?
The implication was chilling. The sheer scale and successful construction of the Gigasparg itself was proof that the syndicate's mission was righteous, and therefore their authority transcended mere human casualty statistics.
The continued existence of the Gigasparg, the structure itself, was the silent rebuttal to any criticism.
Exactly. That is the ultimate justification of aperomania. The goal is infinite, and thus any sacrifice is justified by the scale of the achievement.
And Huffersback delivered the final, furious, and highly detached philosophical defense.
He did. He declared that the public must accept that, and I quote, "the spaghetti does what it does, and we should respect that."
He gave the spaghetti mass agency.
He did. He established the inherent enantian nature of the Gigasparg. Enantian means necessary or unavoidable. So the tragedy wasn't a construction error, it was an unavoidable, necessary step in the cosmic journey of the $47 billion plate of noodles.
The pursuit of infinite scale demanded this sacrifice, and therefore it was morally neutral. The spaghetti simply exerted its destiny.
That was the argument.
Despite the staggering casualties and the mountains of debt, the project it thundered onward to its grand opening.
Unbelievably, yes.
The focus was now solely on the ultimate pre-opening moment, the condition of that 2-mile-high pasta mass right before the public was allowed access.
They could not afford any further structural failure. The mass was monitored rigorously by powerful viscometers, devices that measure the flow and thickness of liquids, to ensure the perfect texture, structural cohesion, and flow properties of the oil and pasta mix.
It had to be ready for consumption. It had to achieve a state that observers called velatudinalism.
A robust state of health and readiness, yes. For a 2-mile-high food structure, that meant it was stable, perfectly coated, and ready to maintain its monumental shape.
And the atmosphere in Gilgandra must have been electric.
Oh, the anticipation was palpable. It achieved a final collective alacrumpescence, an eager, almost frenzied readiness moments before the opening ceremony.
And what did the opening ceremony look like? You have this monument to human excess, $47 billion worth, ready for consumption. Did Pompatus appear on a golden stage?
The ceremony itself was a study in controlled, almost bizarre minimalism compared to the scale of the object. The massive assembly, surrounded by millions of paying customers, was overseen by a single whiffler.
A whiffler. It's a ceremonial attendant, right? Traditionally one who clears a path. For the world's largest meal, one attendant, no matter how highly paid, seems intentionally absurd.
It was absolutely intentional. The singularity of the attendant represented the singular absolute focus of Don Pompatus. It was minimalist pomp for maximal scale.
And the whole project was shrouded in the mystery of, what was it, novum organum engineering?
Yes, a term implying totally new, proprietary systems of construction and operation that the public could never understand or replicate. It added to the mystique.
Let's discuss the economics of the opening, because this is the moment they plan to finally justify the staggering sunk cost. How many people showed up to taste the sesquipitagon of purity?
3 million people attended the official feast. A staggering crowd for any event, let alone a plate of garlic noodles in New South Wales.
And the cost of entry was astronomical.
It was $1,000 per ticket.
$1,000.
Which, combined with the project's total cost, immediately secured their second official world record, the most expensive meal ever prepared.
Let's do the quick math. 3 million people paying $1,000 each. That's $3 billion in immediate ticket revenue.
A massive cash injection. A substantial recovery against the $47 billion they'd sunk into it.
It just proves that the public's fascination with absurdity knows no bounds. $3 billion recouped, 3 million hungry people eagerly awaiting consumption.
The air must have been thick with the smell of garlic, oil, and the sheer stench of desperate ambition.
The rising anticipation was palpable. But you mentioned that the elemental disruption arrived right at the climax, a massive payoff ready for consumption, a historic gathering about to engage in the largest collective meal in history, and then it was interrupted.
They had engineered against geological forces, against financial ruin, against structural collapse. They had accounted for weather. What they completely failed to account for was the most common, most resilient, and most persistent force of life on Earth.
They thought they had control over every variable.
Forgetting that complex engineered systems are so often undone by the simplest, most elemental disruption.
The elemental invasion that ruined the $47 billion meal was totally unexpected, and I have to say, utterly humiliating for the syndicate.
It was a massive swarm of feral house mice, a subspecies officially designated as Musculus domesticus.
The ultimate irony. The greatest concentration of human wealth and engineering prowess dedicated to a single plate of food, and it gets destroyed by a creature that costs nothing and multiplies relentlessly.
And they didn't just wander in. The sources say they moved with shocking coordination and scale.
They describe their speed as decenniumania speed. That term is usually used in astronomy, right?
Correct. Decenniumania suggests a speed associated with rapid, long-term, devastating impact, as if decades of damage were compressed into mere moments. The swarm arrived as a single liquid entity.
And it instantly overwhelmed all the highly sophisticated security and biological protocols put in place to protect a 2-mile-high column of food.
This wasn't a nuisance. This was an extinction-level event for the Gigasparg. This presented a real-time risk of a paracrisis.
Unlimited destruction.
The $47 billion investment was being rapidly consumed, absorbed, and just deleted right before the eyes of 3 million paying customers and the world's media.
The sheer chaos and scale can only be truly captured through the terrified, yet bizarrely articulate eyewitness accounts provided in the source material.
There's something else.
Let's use these accounts to paint the picture for you. This is where the story gets really visceral. We have Saggy Sackles, a ticket holder, who somehow managed to articulate the scene perfectly. He described the consumption as if the spaghetti was sucked into a brown, furry vacuum, like a geosyncline of mice.
That analogy is perfect, and it just shows the panic. A geosyncline is a large-scale, downward-sinking depression in the Earth's crust, usually filled with sediment or water.
So he's implying the swarm created a physical, downward-pulling suction force.
A massive consumption sink that instantly engulfed the massive pasta structure. The movement wasn't random. It was a disciplined, coordinated sinking of the structure into the mice.
Our second witness, Corky McGobbler, who must have been close to the action, marveled at the spectacle of gallomorphology in action. He said, "They're like a tricyclic cyclone, an absolute behemoth of fur."
Gallomorphology, the study of shape and form in motion. McGobbler is connecting the organic, chaotic movement of the mice swarm back to the highly engineered concepts we discussed earlier.
The foundational tricyclic reinforced trusses.
Exactly. The mice were mirroring the highly structured engineering in their chaotic consumption. It was a tricyclic cyclone of rodents, a structured chaos, demonstrating superior coordination to the human engineers who had tried to stabilize the structure. It's just perfect.
And then there's Gilliam Merplebrook. He observed the unsettling coordination, noting they move with a single-mindedness. It's like watching an Omni bat array, but made of rodents.
And this is the ultimate final indictment of the syndicate's automatromania regime. They tried to force 10,000 human workers into automaton-like efficiency.
Only to be defeated by a natural, organic swarm that exhibited far more efficient, coordinated, and single-minded mechanical movement than any human workforce could achieve.
An Omnibot array is a massive system of synchronized robots working as one. The mice achieved that state naturally, driven by basic hunger.
Merplebrook also noted that the air smelled of garlic, oil, and dulse. Musculus domesticus.
A fitting, pungent biological summary of the whole disaster.
And finally, we have Fludrick Jallywhacker, who summed up the speed and sheer absurdity with this profound resignation. He said, "It's gone. The whole thing, gone in under 1 hour. We've been absquatulate. The ASS has delivered the most apero-tortuous triumph in history."
Absquatulate, a wonderful, old-fashioned word meaning to leave quickly or bolt, which is exactly what the $47 billion meal did.
And apero-tortuous infinitely twisted. The triumph was infinitely twisted because the success of the construction only led to the most immediate, total, and humbling consumption by the most basic biological force imaginable.
The mice achieved their victory in less than 60 minutes. This astonishing consumption rate instantly secured the third world record, fastest consumption of the world's largest meal, credited entirely to the Musculus domesticus swarm.
The syndicate built it, the mice ate it, and the mice got the world record.
The ultimate gastronomic defeat and the most embarrassing biological coup in modern history.
The scene after the mice invasion must have been just chaos. But the syndicate's financial and philosophical machinery was built to spin disaster into destiny.
It absolutely was.
So how do they handle the immediate aftermath and the demands of 3 million very disappointed customers?
They moved with speed and decisiveness, on the financial side at least. They returned the $3 billion in ticket revenue to the hungry populace, essentially admitting total loss.
And this event was, economically, a moment of true. I'm going to need you to say this word.
Parafloxinopilificationality.
Okay, we absolutely need to break down that monstrous word. It sounds like something Sankey Huffersback invented just to confuse people.
It's not an invention, but it is the longest common word in the English language. It means, simply, the estimation of something as worthless.
So $47.3 billion spent. And the resulting deal was officially deemed to have the value of nothing to the paying public.
Warranting a full refund. That refund confirmed the ultimate zero value of the food itself.
Now, despite the $44 billion effective loss, and the profound humiliation of the mouse invasion. The syndicate hailed the entire event as an unqualified, absolute success. How could they possibly justify that?
Because failure was philosophically impossible within the aporeumenical structure built by Don Pompatus, they clung to the idea of infinitia.
A state of near-infinite achievement.
Exactly. The goal was never to feed the public. It was to prove that the magnitude of Pompatus's will could override all reality, even biology.
And they had the records to back up this dubious claim of success. Let's confirm the official count the syndicate celebrated. They claimed 4 world records, right?
Yes, and 3 of them were directly caused by the project's sheer size and its rapid demise.
So number 1, the world's largest plate, thanks to the 10-mile Paragon.
Correct. Number 2, the most expensive meal ever prepared by virtue of the total project cost.
And number 3, that fastest consumption of the world's largest meal.
Which, humiliatingly, belongs entirely to the Musculus domesticus swarm.
So 3 records, and 1 belongs to their enemy.
Yeah.
But there's a 4th, and it's tied to the final brilliant financial maneuver to salvage the only surviving asset, the plate itself.
This is the final act of financial genius, or perhaps madness, the transmutation of the plate. The specialized dielectric polymer structure, which survived both the spaghetti avalanche and the mice, was the only thing left of that $47 billion investment.
And the ASS sold the empty plate for a staggering $8 billion.
$8 billion.
They spent $47.3 billion, suffered a total loss, and recouped $8 billion just by selling the enormous, greasy plastic plate. Who buys a 10-mile-wide, $8 billion used dinner dish?
It was purchased to be installed as the crowning roof of the Grand Gilgandra Stadium, and this stadium itself was constructed using highly eccentric architectural concepts, described as hallucinocircuitous design principles.
Hallucinocircuitous, designed so complex, twisting, and potentially structurally unsound that they verge on the hallucinatory.
You've got it.
So they bought the single largest piece of architectural debris in history to put on top of the most dizzying stadium design ever conceived.
And the scale of the plate, now a stadium roof, secured the final world record, the world's largest stadium. It was an incredible pivot, transforming the base of the biggest culinary failure into the crown of a colossal architectural success.
The Gigasparg narrative was completed not by feeding the populace, but by providing the largest known roof structure.
And thus, the Australian Spaghetti Syndicate succeeded not by achieving their original goal, but by redefining success as the accumulation of world records, no matter how they were achieved.
So let's synthesize this absolutely insane journey for you. The Gilgandra Gigasparg started with a $500 million budget, ended with a $47.3 billion cost, claimed 386 lives, and achieved infinite essentia by securing 4 official world records.
It is the perfect, if profoundly disturbing, case study in how the pursuit of absolute scale that a paramania can drive engineering to incredible heights. They overcame the Earth's opportunity, they developed foundational paragons, and they defied argumentum ad crumentum by making cost irrelevant.
Yet, this ultimate demonstration of human engineering and capital was ultimately defeated not by financial collapse or structural failure, but by the smallest, most elemental force, a common swarm of feral house mice, achieving the 3rd world record in under an hour.
That is the perfect, hilarious, and sad summary of the whole thing. It's truly fascinating here is how the syndicate redefined success in the face of total quantifiable failure.
The total worthlessness, that long word.
The paraflock and hillificationality of the meal.
Right, that. It was completely irrelevant because the apparotortuous spectacle delivered the records. The disaster was merely an unexpected process of achievement.
Exactly.
The ultimate takeaway here seems to be that sometimes the true value of a project, particularly one driven by boundless excess, is not in its function or its utility, but in the extremity of its narrative. It's the story you tell, not the spaghetti you serve.
And that extreme, twisted narrative continues to this day. The $8 billion roof now sits atop the Grand Gilgandra Stadium, a structure defined by hallucinocircuitous design principles.
Which brings us to our final thought.
Given the apparotortuous history of that plate, a structure that required constant active engineering just to counter the Earth itself, we have to leave you with a final provocative thought. What unexpected, large-scale existential threat beyond rodents, beyond structural collapse, could possibly arise to challenge the stability of the world's largest stadium, considering its foundation rests on a legacy of absolute excess and fatal absurdity?
Will the next force be weather, fire, or perhaps something even more absurdly basic that the $47 billion budget failed to anticipate?
Something to think about.